Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton, one of the leading intellectual figures in this part of the world. Welcome, Buck.
I'm so sorry if I'm one of the leading intellectual figures. We are truly doomed in this part of the country. But thank you for the compliment.
And I'll also say, with political ambitions as well, I noticed that you have not made your way up to Washington, despite the obvious need for some improvement there.
Well, I'll agree with. I would think that any rational American would agree with that.
Now, we've talked about this before, and on several venues, about the crisis that faces the world, our country, with the coronavirus epidemic, pan-epidemic, and the benefits that vaccinations give people. And there have been some enormous resistance about that, and many people have not taken that step, saying that they control their bodies, they don't trust the news they've received. There may be some occult danger. And the American exceptionalism allows them to avoid the vaccination. And often those people are to the right of the political world. And there are also people that are Afro-American or other groups that have had a bad experience with government health policy in the past and are reluctant to trust. Yes, that's right, a very famous, infamous is the right word, a very infamous experience. And so now we have a situation where to cajole people into having those vaccinations, differing kinds of punitive measures are being undertaken, and it's turned into a political contest in a way, the politics involved. Would you like to opine on this issue? What are your comments about this?
Well, I have many comments about this, and it bothers me on a very severe level. I'm sure you've heard the saying, draw the line and then plot the points. You decide on the line you want, you decide what you want the data to say, and then having drawn that line, you find the data that gives you that line, which is not the scientific method, obviously. It's along the line of that saying, if you torture the data enough, it will confess.
Yes.
And it just seems beyond the bounds of reason that an individual would say, first of all, a mask doesn't work. Secondly, even if the mask works, I can't breathe when I'm in the mask. And thirdly, I don't trust this vaccine. And fourthly, even if I trusted it to be safe, it still isn't effective. And fifth, even if it was safe and effective, it's nobody's business but my own whether I take it. For a single individual to hold all of those opinions seems to be almost beyond the bounds of comprehension, unless that individual is drawing the line and then plotting the points. He's decided that he is not going to take any sort of preventative measures whatsoever, no matter what the risk and no matter what the evidence is that he should be doing so.
Well, let's go into ethics a little bit.
Yes.
So presumably the way the things work is you can live your life, it can be free, you can do as you wish, as long as you don't injure anyone else. So presumably you could walk around in the park and, I don't know, sing the national anthem repeatedly or whatever. You could anything, as long as you didn't hurt other people. And the state's responsibility is to stop people from injuring one another. Thus, they're something called a crime, meaning that you've injured someone else, and the state makes itself known and then indeed punishes people that have injured other people or has restrictions on the ability of one person to injure another person. Now that is it's sort of a slippery slope often. I think from an ethical point of view, Jeremy Bentham, the greatest good for the greatest number. However, if the state really starts to push that to unreasonable limits, the state could use its power to cause you to do almost anything. Say, well, it's dangerous if you drive a car, you might hit someone, so you can't drive cars. It may be different. It may cause global warming if you run your air conditioner. There's any number of activities that presumably could injure another person, and where the boundary is drawn, that requires some art attached to it. And in doing this, we get the guidance from the judicial system, I think, or often we make efforts to do that, and what comports with the Constitution. So maybe we could just, staying on the vaccine part of it, is there an obligation, is there anything, just to go on this point, in the Constitution that says, well, it's mandatory that you are vaccinated? Is there any legal basis, and we'll explore this issue.
Well, yeah, you've opened up a lot of possible avenues there. That traditional lock-in policy is that we begin with the individual having all the rights, but when we live in a community, those rights can and should be curtailed by the consent of the members of the community, so one individual's rights don't trample another. And as you say, the state can criminalize some behavior, and it's not just a matter of criminalization. There are private rights of action as well. So if you run into me and cause me damage, I can recover against you. Traditionally, state governments have always held what is called the police power under the Constitution, and actually preceding the Constitution. And this generally means that the state can regulate to protect public safety, public health, and public morals, public welfare in general. And of course, the key is the word that you used, what is reasonable. The idea is always to try to find what is reasonable, to try to cut off the chain of causation before it becomes all enveloping and it swallows civil liberties. But particularly, the Supreme Court recognized more than a century ago that the state, if it wishes, can compel certain public health measures. And if you liken those public health measures to speed limits, the people who are saying, I cannot be compelled to take this vaccine, would also, I would hope, say, I cannot be compelled to drive a speed limit on a busy highway. Public safety is at risk in both circumstances. I think the only distinction that you can reasonably, to use that word, come up with is that they would argue there is no real threat here. My body is not a vector for disease. The disease is being made up. The communicability or severity of the pandemic is being exaggerated for the government's own nefarious purposes to get its foot in the door of additional types of regulation. And this is a violation of my natural rights.
Well, yes, and police power is sort of a tricky word. I don't know, is the police power in the Constitution, not to make it, not to go too much in that direction.
Well,
but it's common law. I know,
Yes.
I know governments. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, so just probing some of the objections that
Yes.
are there, I think there'd be libertarians that would, and that's the argument that's presented is.
Yes.
Well, for the government to do something to me, I have to see it. I have to give them permission or see the legislation or that allows that to happen. Mm-hmm. And speed limits might be, well, we've made several things. Driving automobiles, making that illegal, or that seems excessive, or observing speed limits. Or just to continue that, let's say the amount of pollution that just to make this argument, the pollution, somehow your activities are polluting the earth, and it's reasonable to say that if you're going to injure people, not directly, but in some huge length of time in the future, in taking that privilege of, let's say, running your air conditioner away from the individual, presumably the individual is going to suffer or have some kind of, you could say, injury. He's going to be hot, and maybe it's not lethal. So there is kind of a balance that exists, and the argument would be a little bit about the the person that's going to be against the vaccination, just on this one point. And it's a little bit different than driving a car, I think. If you're going to actually, it's sort of a unitary event. It's one event that's taking place, and it's kind of hard to go halfway with it. You could do halfway, and should it be proven to the satisfaction of the individual that that this is a beneficial thing for him or her personally. Let's not think about anyone else. Let's just start with that. If you say, for my purposes, this is something you should do. It's going to protect you and help you, and you should just do it, forgetting everyone else. Does an individual have a right at that point to say, well, I'm not persuaded, whatever it is, I'm just not persuaded, this might come up with Jehovah's Witnesses. It might be a good example.
Yes.
Somebody that, let's just suppose we compare this Jehovah's Witness story where the person is going to receive blood, and it's a they believe that it puts, I'm not a theologian on the subject, but it's certainly against their theological viewpoint.
Yes.
And they refuse to accept the blood, even though many people would say this is the thing to do, and they would not do that. And also, just to continue along the line, some people say with their children, their children they have cancer and we're going to treat them. No, we're not going to do that because it's against us for some reason. Or they might turn down medical care. Not an uncommon story at all. It looks like you've got a very accessible cancer. We can just get it out and you'll be cured. But if you don't, and the person says, no, I've looked this over and my mother died with cancer, with a bad cancer operation. Thus, I have my reasons that might be rational, or I'm frightened of hospitals. So on that point, just for the vaccination, is there an argument to say that just not looking at anyone else, looking at yourself, if no one else was involved, would it be fair for a person to not take the vaccination? But not imagining it had no other impact on anyone else.
Well, before I answer that, I'll go back to your very first question in this group. Is the police power to be found in the Constitution? That kind of reverses the situation. The states had all power before they formed the national government, and they delegated the power they desired to delegate to the national government. The power that they did not delegate to the national government, they reserved to themselves. So there doesn't have to be something in the Constitution that enables state power.
I mean, not to overkill, I know, certainly know I'm way out of my depth, but isn't it all rights, not all other right, or other, I guess, duties, responsibilities, or powers are reserved, not particularly elicited or stated, are reserved for the people in the states?
That is the 10th Amendment, and I'm one of the people who would argue that the 10th Amendment is essentially a truism. It says powers that are not delegated or reserved, and that's a tautology. Of course, if we haven't delegated it, we've reserved it. So the 10th Amendment does not change the meaning of the Constitution at all. Those powers had been reserved before there was a 10th Amendment. So the point is, no, the police power is not mentioned in the Constitution, and it doesn't have to be. The states have it. But going to your...
Okay, and we can move past whether the states are the right artifice for this or the national government. But all right, but yes, what about the argument on the on
your last question about
on Jehovah's Witnesses? You're an individual.
Yes.
Could you turn down care of any type that the wise people said to you, this is your interest to do this?
Yes. Well,
and we're going to make you do it.
Well, the premise that you gave me, as I understand you saying it, that if it concerned only that individual.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I think that is none of the state's business.
Okay.
So, but the state's rationale for this.
I understand.
Now, can you ever, if you go down the chain of causation, can you ever say that the individual lives life in a bubble and will have zero effect on his community at any time. You can't say that. So that's where the line drawing comes in. But assuming you could say or hold as a matter of policy or prove that this vaccination is good for you and you alone, and the fact that you receive this vaccination will have no downstream effects for anyone else, if you could really say that, then no, that is beyond the state's ability.
Okay.
So,
and now, all right.
yeah.
Now, just having pursued this, I think the evidence would be out there that, such as it is, that the risk-benefit ratio for some parts of the population, just staying on that narrow line, I want to. I'm not interested in anyone else. I'm just interested in me, and I note that. Firstly, the anxiety of taking this, maybe I'll have a nervous breakdown if I do this, or I'll be very, very nervous. I won't be able to work. My paranoid nature will surface. Okay, and so it would be bad for my mental health. And so a certain cohort of people at least have some. I'm going to come down being for vaccination, but I'm just trying to make the argument that it's out there as to how people are justifying this. So they would say, well, I'm probably going to be okay, and it's not necessary, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think both of us agree, well, all right, if it were not for other people, you could have the right to resist it.
Yes, you become. I mean, the main problem is that you become a disease vector. And I could argue that the people statistically least likely to cause automobile accidents in which other people are involved are also of a certain age level, and that cohort, if you're 35 or 40 years old, you've got the perfect combination of experience and still good perception and good reflexes.
Yes.
If you're 16, you've got great perception and reflexes and no experience. If you're 70, you've got great experience and lousy reflexes.
Yes.
So that would be akin to saying, well, 30 years old and 40-year-olds don't need to obey the speed limit because there's just statistically less danger with them.
Well, I mean, we get to it's the other, where that ship is sailing is to the impact on other people.
Yes.
And so I think we'd say an argument, if that were alone, that would be sort of a privilege that would be there, and the idea would be, okay, now we're going to say that this is if you have responsibility to other people, then you're going to have to look after their interests, and there's a group of people that are vulnerable, and that you could continue to give them this disease, this problem, and thus it would be your moral obligation to be vaccinated. But expanding that argument, you could say, what about abortion? So if you're saying, well, assuming you have another human being there, and I'm going to injure that other human being in order to I feel no responsibility to that person. Is there some kind of contradiction in a way that about your obligations to other people? So, and this also goes along with at least the argument that's out there. Well, it's my body; I'll do with it what I want to. So people might say, well, I have, I'm pregnant and I have been someone in utero, but it's my body; I'll do what I want to with it. And even you could presumably say, well, of course, at the end, the embryo was going to be terminated by my decision, there's some similarity, which has to be carefully parsed out, between what an individual would do in those circumstances, with saying, and this is the common thing that's said, it's my body, I'll do as I wish, even if presumably there could be some kind of injury, and moreover, the way you treat your body injures other people too. You could say, I've decided to do myself in. I'm just going to hang myself, or well, it's going to injure your family, do this, do that. So your actions inevitably injure other people, yes, depending on whether it's just impossible to avoid it.
Well,
then the question is, finally you get into the balance of this. What is the risk of taking the vaccine? What is the personal risk attached to it? They're asking a person to assume this risk. And what is the societal advantages that occur when that happens? And there are arguments about the individual. I would say that for young people that are in a certain age group, they have some substantial immune system protection against the virus. However, we don't know what the long-term impact could be. We don't know. And it could well be, there could be some organ systems that are going to be injured later in life. It won't be obvious. Thus, there's compelling evidence to say that it's going to be in your interest to take this vaccination no matter what. I mean, I think you could say that. A rational person would say that, with a no matter what being with the assumption there's not some unknowable sensitivity that you might have. You have your autoimmune system has some kind of incredible impairment, so that your autoimmune system could not overcome the vaccine, though this is a messenger RNA type of vaccine. So it's not a traditional vaccine, and there would be only, in my opinion, a few situations where a person would be against their medical interest not to take the vaccine. And then the other thing that's put out there would be some kind of religious difficulty. And I don't know if there is such a difficulty. I mean, I don't know of one. I mean, there could well be different theological viewpoints about putting something in your body that's not natural. I mean, I imagine there could be some opinions. So having said all that, a very limited number of people, very limited, would have an argument that their personal welfare would be jeopardized by taking the vaccine. And then the next question to ask is, well, what are going to be the societal advantages? How are you going to help other people by taking the vaccine? And that argument seems to be pretty powerful, with the caveat that the people that are getting impacted are the people at risk, and those would be people that are older and have an impaired immune system and other comorbidities, and those are exactly the people that have been vaccinated. So they have some kind of protection. And just to continue on the subject, the more people that are vaccinated, the more that are out there, the less powerful the argument is that by getting the vaccine, you're going to be, it'll be a beneficial event for society. If 99.9% of the people are vaccinated, then we compel you to be vaccinated. The argument is somewhat less powerful.
Well, you're raising many interesting questions, but a lot of them I think are purely academic. You and I are both in agreement, and I think you're a frustrated tort lawyer. I think you need to have a second career.
What an insult. Yeah. I've really been... I'm joking. For tort lawyers, I won't go there.
I think that you and I would first agree that in the hypothetical circumstance, and I would argue that this is purely theoretical or hypothetical, that this vaccine would have zero impact on anyone else other than the person receiving it. The state would have zero authority to mandate that vaccine.
Yeah, we're in agreement on that.
I think we would both agree that you could make a proximate cause argument that every action of an individual could conceivably have impacts on other people beyond himself,
right, yes.
Therefore allowing the state to regulate every aspect of our existence.
Yes, that's exactly the point. Yes.
Yeah,
so we have to be very restrained about
and I conceded that about 10 minutes ago. So the question is, where along this chain of causation do you cut off and say, this is where the desires of the individuals trump the command of the state?
Yes.
And I would say, and there are many different theories in tort law you could do that. You have touched on one briefly, the likelihood of injury and the degree of injury versus the burden on the individual. And you try to balance these out. And sometimes they can't be quantified.
Yes.
But once again, we search everybody going through airport security.
Yes.
We require everybody, because it's a matter of administrative convenience.
Yes.
that we can't just say, okay, you're 35 with great eyesight,
Yes.
and you're an Indy race car driver, so you have superb
Right.
reflexes and you've never had a ticket, so we're going to let you break the speed limit. That just becomes administratively inefficient.
Yes.
It's much easier to say you're a breathing human being, you can build up a virus load, you can kill other people, and therefore, unless you fall into one of the traditional areas that our civil libertarian system has long tried to respect,
Yes.
like a religious exemption,
Yes.
you got to take the vaccine. We've now had a beta test of millions of people. What vaccines have caused long-term effects 30 or 40 years down the road? So,
Yes.
what do you do? I think it's a no-brainer.
All right. Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting, just parsing this out is a
Yes.
little bit interesting. I would say that, and a useful exercise. The other thing that's out there, the other point about this is if you refuse to be vaccinated, it is extremely likely that you're going to get the virus. So it was if you say, I'm not going to be vaccinated, I'm just going to be exposed to the virus, and then when you'll ultimately have the same impact pretty much of having been vaccinated. The difference is going to be you're going to be sickened more than you would have otherwise. But you're going to.
But that is your right.
Yeah,
as long as it bothers no one else.
And indeed, the problem will likely go away or be tremendously reduced because it may be just sort of a flash in the pan. If almost everyone has been vaccinated and almost everyone else has had the virus, then presumably these numbers will drop. And the people that are getting sick, I would say this: who is it that's really getting sick? And these are they're the people that are most at risk. They're the people that are dying and going and being hospitalized and using huge amount of resources. So one of the things that happens with this, which is another huge event, is the amount of healthcare resources and financial resources the society has provided in struggling against the epidemic has caused all kinds of other injuries. So all kinds of bad things happen. If you don't get vaccinated, maybe you'll in some way spread the vaccine or the viral epidemic, and then you may have a car accident and no one will be there to take care of you because there's no place. So there are all kinds of arguments to say this would be a good thing to do. And I think just to go to this sort of, in some ways, wind up the conversation, just on this narrow point, that it's going to be a moot issue, I think, quite soon. The number of people that have been vaccinated is a very large number. It's a big number. And it's additionally a big number of people that have had the virus. The real dangerous story here, I think, are the people that are at risk that are not being vaccinated. That's the real, with everything else being equal. And we talked about the individual's responsibilities or whatever. If you say, I'm an at-risk person, there was a young cohort, okay, that's one thing. The other group would be an at-risk population. Someone that's, I don't know, 70 years old, morbid obesity, diabetic, immune compromise, and the person says there's a danger that person is going to be afflicted, and then the amount of resources that are expended to look after that person by society turns out to be a huge, a big number. It's not as if when a person that's not been vaccinated is afflicted, the person still gets every kind of care that's possible. Though some people have said we don't want to do that, but which is another moral bound decline.
Yes.
But I think that's the real danger of what's going on here, and the statistics are really powerful. The second Delta wave of people coming through here, those people that were they were an at-risk population. Well, it's probably getting time for us to end our interchange for now. Buck, do you have any other thoughts on this subject?
Well, I have many thoughts, but we'll have to save that for another episode. But it's something that will be interesting to watch.
Yes.
Interested to watch. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.